Upload.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to Your Yes is Needed podcast. Last podcast, I had my new cousin Kristy, where I was able to just ask her anything without her knowing anything. And we discovered a lot of things about herself. I think she discovered some things about herself. This time, the tables have turned, and I asked her, would you like to ask me questions? Because the reason why she's new cousin, though, like we are truly first cousins and related, I just met her this year. So as much as she knows a lot about me, she really doesn't know me. She has read both of my books, and she did come to Boston to hang out with me and Daniel, my dog. So she knows all about my organization. She knows about my experiences. She knows about my encounterments. But I told her she has permission to ask anything that she wants. And so I don't know none of the questions. So the floor is hers to ask me whatever she would like.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I know that you have a lot of already friends, followers that have read your books, follow your podcast, but there's
I
no.
don't.
Okay, so
No,
great.
no.
Because I want to get to know you. I want everyone else to get to know you. So let's start with a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are today. And I know you talk a lot about this in your book, but there's, I think, things in there that we can kind of pull out that maybe were not in your book.
Okay.
So if you were to give like a 1 to 3 minute elevator speech about you and, kind of a bit about your background, someone just met you for the first time. What are those things you would want them to know about you?
Well, I grew up very athletic, and so I grew up as the only girl in Sauk Village, Illinois, and
The only girl?
yes, and as Mexican, I grew up. I don't speak Spanish, and so, and most people don't think I was Mexican. So, but anyways, yes. So and I went to the Navy for 10 and a half years. I got out. I gained 100 pounds, and for 7 years, I lived a very out of control life. But I did not know that, because as long as I had a full-time job, I felt like I was in control. And I always use that as a test. Like, as long as I have a job, I'm in control. As long as I'm able to do this, I'm in control. So that was my reasoning to be out of control. And um and then I realized, no matter how many times I went to the doctor, they told me you need to change your lifestyle. And no matter how many times I lost my memory or fell asleep behind the wheel, or did a lot of stupid stuff, or ended up in these situations and stuff like that, it wasn't a wake-up call to me. Even my most biggest encounterment of July of 2018, where I fell into a deep black hole, and I had my first wild encounterment. And I was like, and that still did not change me. And what really changed me was a meeting that they put me in, a therapy session that they put me in, called the motivational group. And I was like, no, this ain't it. This is not, there's something bigger. This is not it. This is not motivational. And so that's what made me change my life.
Okay.
It wasn't everything else that, or like the obvious red flags, like that setting that it wasn't forceful. It was volunteer. That is what woke me up.
Okay. You said a lot of good things there that I want to touch on.
I hope that was a good 3-minute elevator music.
Elevator elevator pitch, not music. You weren't singing it. Okay. So the Navy, what made you want to join the Navy? What was it that attracted you?
I always knew.
Okay.
So right after high school, I tried, and I had to lose like 10 pounds. And back then, I knew nothing about weight loss. I knew nothing about weight. I never weighed myself. I never cared about weight. I was like always athletic. So like some days I never like knew how thick I was or how thin I was. I did not care about dieting. I did not care about nothing. So I was like, oh, okay. And I did not know how to lose 10 pounds. And so, so I went to college instead. I went to college on a soccer scholarship.
Oh, very cool. I didn't know that.
Yes, because I was very great at sports. I was great at softball and I was great at soccer. And all the sports now I'm not that great at, but it's just ironic. But so I went to I went on a scholarship there. That's the only way I was able to go to school. And yeah, I only did that. I didn't even graduate from there. I tried again in 2002,
Mhm.
and I went to, yes, I was actually, I think it was around July, August of 2002. I started, signing up. I started becoming interested in the Navy again. And this time I was underweight and without trying. I guess I
Mhm.
was from playing soccer. And I went to what's called MEPS, where you have to go somewhere to pretty much check your physical and mental health to make sure everything's right. And then you swear in. And that day, right before I swore in, that day so happened to be September 11th, 2002. I was at MEPS.
Okay.
And so I was there at 4 o'clock in the morning and we did all the testing. There was all these people, there was all these young folks there. And all we had to do was swear in.
It's a pretty cool
And
swearing day.
yes, however, that's when everything started happening with 9/11. And so we had to evacuate. So I did everything except for swear in.
Mhm.
So I remember all these people were there. And then when it was time to come back, like a couple weeks later to finish the process, there was only a handful of people that came back.
Oh, wow. Dang. So crazy day. That was 2001, right?
Yes, yes, because
Yes.
I shipped out 2002. So
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. So okay. So you swear on 9/11. Wow, what a day.
Mhm.
And how many years were you in the Navy?
10 years and 6 months.
It's a long ass time.
Yes, yes, it is. So yes, and I wanted to be overseas. So they give you a wish list. Not saying that they will grant you a wish list, but they granted mine. I wanted to be overseas. I lived in Japan for 6.5 years.
Very cool. So 10 and a half years, that's a significant part of your life. So
Hmm.
when you exit the Navy, how does that make you feel?
So that's a good question. So most people, um, I actually really want to expound on this part. So most people, I learned, um, and it's important that most veterans or most people that are have ever wore a uniform or ever have a career that they only know by is that they have lived behind this uniform or they have lived behind this job, and the only thing they know is either that uniform or that job. And so their character, their personality, their emotions can all relate to behind this, whatever they put as a forefront to make, because when you have that uniform or when you have that cat card, you feel
It's your identity.
it's your
It's,
identity.
it's who
And then
you
when
are.
that identity is taken away from you, you lose who you really were this whole entire time, because you you thought or you were like, oh, this is how I am, this is whatever. But once they take that away from you, you have no idea what to do. Even though I got a degree when I was in, and I couldn't wait to come out, and I couldn't wait to just, live a life without rules, but it was so different for me. Like, holy smokes. Like even though like I lived in Japan for 6.5 years, I lived in Cuba, then my last duty station was Jersey, and I was back on American soil around people, and I felt like there was no one be able to relate to like the sense of humor, to the overworked hours that we did, to the to the to like the mentality that we had, because you were at least able to go to work or show up to duty and sit with the same people, even if you did not get along with them, but they still have the same mindset. And then when you're taken away from that and you're in this different work environment, you're like, oh wow, like I just can't randomly cuss you out. And that's so that was different. Like I had to watch my mouth. I had to watch how I talk to people. People think I talk like sailorish now. Like, no, it's just huge improvement. Um,
I don't
so
get sailorish from you, but that's maybe because I've got my own sailor mouth.
yeah, so like it's um that was a huge culture shock for me. And I would not have ever expected it. I was in so much denial. I was like, because I got out not on my own, I
Mhm.
got budget cut it out. And so the thought that I put in all this extra work, like, oh, like if you just do this, you're going to get rewarded that. If you work hard this, you're going to get this. And if you're this, and you're going to become that. And you're like, this is all bullshit. And then so, but you realize that 10 years later, and you're like, man, I wish I would have done things differently, more for myself, instead of investing into something that was going to kick me out in a matter of months without my permission. That
Mhm.
was a culture shock for me.
Okay, so that's a good segue to a question I want to ask is, if you were speaking to yourself or someone else that's currently in the Navy or the Army, Marines, or whatever, because I imagine that they all go through the same thing of feeling like they've lost their identity. What is that advice that you would give to them?
So the first thing I did was I hurried up and I wanted a career. I wanted the American dream back in my life. And so,
Or a new identity?
right, but under a career, I wanted an
Mm,
important title,
okay.
because the fact that, oh, you're in the military, you get a different level of respect. It's
Mhm.
just, without getting so into it, it's just the way of marketing has developed how people view veterans.
Mhm.
And so there's this level of respect that comes with the cat card or with the uniform, period. And so when you don't no longer wear it and you're just walking down the street and you look like me, no one's going to be like, hey, did you serve in the Navy there, buddy, for 10.5 years? Like, no one says, like, hey, thank you for your service. Like,
Right.
hey, no one cares. And so, like, you're just this other person, you're just an additional person. And so, like, the life that you used to have no longer exists. Like, this, like when people like start a business or when they start a family, they can see that thing grow.
Mhm.
And when that thing is no longer there, you're like, what did I just work my ass off for?
Right.
So it's almost, it hits hard if you don't have a good exit plan, a healthy exit plan, a a real transparent exit plan.
Okay, so if I understand you
Did
right,
I answer the
you
question?
that's what I want to make sure. So what you would recommend to anyone in that, to yourself at that time is to think about what the exit plan is. Um, maybe being truthful with yourself that you're not going to go get
Yes.
that big important job right away unless maybe you've prepared for that in some way.
I would say you have time.
Mm,
You have time. Like, your body went through a whole shit ton of stress.
mhm.
You've been away from your family and your friends for such a long time. Maybe no one understands you, but it's like it's a good time just to discover who you really are and what you really like. Like, you have time. The reason why most people lose their shit is because they feel like they lost purpose.
Okay.
And the reason why they feel like they lost purpose is because they feel like their purpose was taken away from them. But what
Mhm.
it is that their identity was taken away from them because they invested so much into that identity. Your purpose is something that God gives you,
Mhm.
and no one can take that purpose away from you, not even uniform, not no nothing. So if your purpose came from God, the only person that can take that purpose away from you is God, nobody else. So once you realize that, then you're like, oh shit, like this is more fulfilling than any other thing I've ever been in my life.
So, what I take from that, or what I hear from you, is that really, yes, taking time is important, but even more important is focusing on understanding your God-given purpose, whether
Correct.
in or outside of the Navy. What is that
Correct.
God-given purpose? Because no matter what life throws at you, you're ready.
I follow a lot of veteran pages, and there's this idea that once you have your job and once you have your money back together and once you that you should just be happy because most people don't have that opportunity.
Mhm,
Yes, yes, we are happy. However, there's still a lack of fulfillment. So most people that have not reached that career or that second career or that second desire, they're over here looking at these group of people that have these nice jobs and they're just like, oh, you're just lucky that you're there. But the people that are here already are like, wait, this is what we worked for again. And this is still not the answer. There's something still missing.
mhm,
I remember someone has shared this on this veteran page that I was following that says, I have a pretty good job. I travel pretty often and something's still missing. And most of the comments were like, you're so ungrateful. And I just chuckled because they're like, you're missing the point. He's
mhm,
already there and he's telling you that there is something still missing.
mhm,
You should just look up to that idea that maybe this is not the answer, but it's something bigger.
mhm.
So some of us, the few of us wrote in the comments like, it's because you have not found purpose yet. So we are on our second career and still we can say the greatest fulfillment is purpose.
So, great advice for someone that's in it and going through it. What about someone outside of it, but close to that person, a cousin, a brother, a sister, a spouse? How can they help someone realize, their purpose from the outside? Is there anything that they can do? How can they be supportive?
Be supportive of someone's purpose or be
No,
supportive of how to find their purpose.
that's how to find their purpose.
So so I would say that I'm definitely in my purpose. And the way for me to encourage someone to for someone to find their purpose is to follow their intuition. Your intuition is like pretty much instructions from a bigger source, a higher source. And you feel this tug inside of you to do it. But sometimes, many times, we stop that intuition because like, oh, I don't want to do that. Or, oh, I don't think I can do that. So
Mhm,
we shut this intuition down because either it's embarrassing or we don't see ourselves in that position.
mhm,
And so we just let it pretty much starve instead of feeding it. And in order for that intuition to become hungrier and greater in your life, you have to feed it. And
right.
the more we starve it, the thing just eventually just sounds like it's faded or fainted. It sounds
Mhm,
very far away. And then we end up having conversations like, "Oh, I have dreams," or "I had this and I had that,"
mhm.
or we become bitter, jealous motherfuckers. Like, well, you're just lucky. No, bitch, you shut your intuition down because
Right.
you didn't want to do shit with it. And now the other people that stepped into in their intuition, they're like, oh shit, how to do it? Because it is hard.
Mhm.
It is hard stepping and listening to your intuition because sometimes you sound like an idiot. Okay.
Right.
Yes. All right. So when I felt the pull to run a gym, I can tell you right now, I did not want to. And I've said this over and over again. Sometimes, most of the times I have met people that are in purpose, did not want to do what they're doing right now. And it's not like we're not grateful for it now, but it's like this, oh no, oh, I'm not doing that. Nah, boo boo. Like for me to tap into mental health in the Spanish minority community, you're kidding me, right? Like the people that deny mental health, you want me to talk about mental health to a bunch of people that don't want to talk about mental health? That's how I felt.
Mhm.
However, I'm able to use it and talk about mental health through my training. Now, oh, you power, you did, you do that. Yes. Now this is why. Now that is cooler. But if you were to just focus on just that one thing, and then yeah, no one wants, like, it's not an easy topic to talk about, especially in our culture, in our community.
Mhm.
Like, no, it is a sign of weakness.
Right.
And so it's intriguing to me that we can use weights and talk about mental health and people listen. I'm not saying everyone listens, but it's intriguing for the people that do listen.
I feel like you sneak in those therapy sessions in
Correct.
your gym.
Correct. And
Now,
so
oh,
it
good.
works.
Yeah. So, kind of on that note, if people were open to traditional therapy, do you think it would be as effective as the way that you work with a lot of your uh, community in your gym?
Yes, I think traditional therapy is great. Like, what was really effective for me was cognitive therapy. Um, Hence why I focus a lot on the whys. Why do you think like this? Why? Why do you think like this? And why do you do this? Why? Like, you keep thinking why until you get to the core. And so um I went to AA, I went to one-on-one therapy, I went to group therapy. I went to all sorts of therapy sessions. And then the
Mhm.
last therapy session, then I was like, no, this ain't it, dog. Was the one that was called the motivational therapy. And I was informed that some of these people have been there for a very long time. And it's a weekly mandatory meeting if I wanted to be part of it. It was during my working hours, which means I had to tell my work that, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm in. And you have to understand, like, me during that time, I was so desperate for change and help that I listened to everything. If someone said you have to make a left turn here, do this, I did it. Like, I was desperate. I
Mhm.
listened to everything. And so it was, you have to understand how hard it was for me to be in that group and say, no, I don't think this is it for me. That was hard
Mhm.
because I already had permission from my work to 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 um to take
Attend.
the time off and attend it weekly for
Mhm.
as long as I needed to. I had to be part of this group. Pretty much I had to graduate to get there and to be in it and say, oh, and there was no other group after this. There was nothing
Mhm.
to offer me after this. And I was like, man, it took me 8 weeks to get into the mental health program, do all these sessions to get here. And if I say no, that means I'm no longer part of this program. So I was like, holy shit, what do I do? And
Mhm.
so I kept going and I just kept getting more irritated. I was like, I don't think this is it, man. Like, I don't, like, where, it just felt like everyone just kept going in circles. That's all
Mhm.
I remembered. Like, it was the same problem every week. And I would suggest something, I wish we shushed down. So it feels like sometimes that's a story of my life when I try to bring something up. And I was like, and it just kept going in circles. And I was like, when does the freedom begin? That's exactly what I asked myself. When I was like, I don't, I believe that you can live bigger than this. I believe that you can become unlimited. I believe that you can become, yes, there's the problem, but I believe that you can become bigger than the problem. Like,
Mhm.
and this is something I wasn't brought up to think. There
Mhm.
wasn't something that, yeah, I was told you can be whoever you want, but you have to be like this. So
Right.
you're still limiting me. Or like, yeah, you can big dreams, big dream, but like smash my dreams. Like, I can be told one thing, but then the outcome was always different. So I was like, something inside of me was like, this ain't it. And then finally, verbally, I said, this ain't it. And
Mhm.
so that's when I started putting everything into Iron Therapy 2.0.
Awesome. So, there's value in therapy, although you sneak it in a way that I think people are more open to, even though I know I've seen your stories that not always, even in the gym, you didn't always find the cognitive therapy, the other therapies that working for you, but you got your enlightenment, and I might argue you got that from God. So kind of on that note, how do you feel about um, people relying on God as the ultimate therapist, or even church as the support to overcome these challenges? What are your views on that?
Overall, I think God, Jesus, is the greatest therapist of all time. Okay. However, I do believe we do need help to believe, to get to the belief system of how we are able to perform miracle signs and wonders. Like, some people cannot get to my gym and they want to squat 300 pounds right away. You need my help to get to 300 pounds. Okay.
Mm.
Sometimes it's not God that is lacking the miracle signs and wonders. It is our belief system that is limiting us from understanding the miracle signs and the wonders. Like, I'm a big believer that I can do all things through Christ. Like, I'm a big believer. As soon as I can, I'm in. That's why I do so much random things, right? Like, I'm not questioning myself. I'm not limiting myself. It says I can do all things. I run with it. But I think too many times, and I've seen it, that people hide behind this ideology of who they say or what they want people to believe who they are, but live a very different lifestyle or a belief system. Okay, so, like, for example, all right, so I had, one of the things that happened when I became drunk is I drew myself into a hole financially. I've dug myself into a big motherfucking hole, okay? And so when I became sober, I was like, oh shit, look what I did to myself. And I have a really good job. And so um when things started happening with the roof and started, like, and I was like, man, where's this money going to come from? I can say, God, I'm going to trust you. However, my lower back was hurting like hell. And usually what the lower back pain represents is financial troubles, financial stress. And
Okay.
that's when I was like, yo, I'm full of shit. I say one thing, but I'm not believing it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how do I get to the point of believing it, even if I don't see it? That's how I talk to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, but most people just want to say it without putting in the work to activate their faith. That's what I was trying to get to. A lot of people just want to work, just say it, but don't want to put in the work to step out in faith.
Right.
I love stepping out. No, first of all, yes, I don't love stepping out in faith, but I love stepping out in faith, and it scares the shit out of me. However, I know that me leaning so much into God, there's an outcome. At least I know that. At
Right.
least I know that. Like, because when I relied on myself, I had a different outcome. But if I'm going to follow all of my instructions, at least I know there's an outcome. So that builds my faith stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. In the beginning, it's hard, especially when you lean on yourself so much. Oh, no, I got it. No, I got it. And sometimes God will put you in these situations, be like, boo boo, you got it? Like, when are you going to give it up, dog? When are you going to give it up? And you're like, all right, you win. And so we think, oh, like, oh, that's just, it's just God testing me. You're right, but you got to pass the test.
Right.
And so I believe, and I'd be calling it out in my gym. Like they're like, oh, I don't think God wants me to. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. Go do it. But we don't want to do the hardest thing because
Hmm.
internally we don't want to fail. But what if
Right.
God doesn't show up? Just say that. Just say it. Say it out loud. He already knows your heart.
Right.
So like confess. Like there's a big difference in and saying what you feel versus staying what you feel in. You can
Hmm.
say what you feel, but staying in your feelings is a different story. That's why I be
Now,
telling folks, like, say it, just say it.
right.
I remember one of my athletes, I knew why she was afraid of squatting. Like, I already knew that. And so I cornered her more and more. I put the pressure on her more and more. And she's like, you know why I don't like squatting? I was like, say it, just say it. She's like, I'm scared. I'm like, thank you. And then like destroyed it right 10 minutes later. So sometimes the reason why we don't say things, because if we believe if we say things, then it's going to come to pass. It
Hmm.
already is coming to pass because you are thinking it. A man becomes what he thinks. So if you're
Right.
already thinking it, it's already happening. But the moment you like just vomit out, you trust me, it's a lot better to say it versus staying in it. And there's the difference. Okay.
Right.
Did I answer your
I
question?
Yeah, I think we're taught to be successful, you need to speak things into existence, but
Correct.
on the flip side, that makes it scarier to say those things because it, like you said, you're almost making it real, but it's already real if you're already thinking about it.
Right. So like, yes, like w- I I already asked want someone to do an episode of toxic positivity. We have to be careful that we're not feeding toxic positivity. I don't want to get too much into the topic because we are going to do a podcast about this, but you have to understand the difference between being positive and denying how you're really feeling and suppressing it with an emotion that you're not familiar with just because your belief system taught you that you should confess good things when really you're really dying inside. There's a dangerous line, like this season right here, October season, when it
Mhm.
gets dark in New England and it gets when you wake up it's dark, when you go home it's dark. It's one of my roughest seasons. Okay, that sad seasonal something something something, like that's real. And so I was like, man, I'm trying to fight it. And I'm like, bitch, this shit is whooping your ass. I was like, yeah, you're right. And as soon as I said that, I was like, I'm over it. But like the more we hide it or deny it, it's like it begins to take over you. But the more like you just confess it and say you're like, it's not that bad, then suddenly that this other part of you that's trying to come out is coming out. But this the emotion of, oh, I can't say nothing is suppressing everything else down.
Mhm.
So in order to have rivers of flowing water, you have to say everything. And I'm not saying like being positive is bad. Like being positive is great, but being honest is better.
Mhm. Okay, so we have gone from talking about um having an identity around your job, um, your career, whether that's an actual 9 to 5 job or a Navy, the Army, or anything like that. Finding purpose rather than creating your identity around these things. We've gone into talking about um, therapy in different ways and how it's valuable, and of course, God being the ultimate therapist. And then you've talked a lot about your instructions, and you and I have talked about how you get to hear your instructions a lot clearer than probably most
No,
people.
I don't see. I still disagree with that. I think your instructions become, I don't think your instructions become clear. I think your instructions, I think you become more confident in knowing what your instructions are. And I don't think confidence comes from just following one or two. I think confidence comes from doing every single instruction, no matter how much you don't want to do it. That's where your confidence comes from. I don't think they become clear. I think you just know. It's kind of like a kid lost in the park. Like
Mhm.
you have two kids, and if there was a whole bunch of kids, you'll be able to identify their voices right away.
Mhm.
Right.
Right, but you were
But
in a position when you first started hearing your instructions where you weren't exactly open to it.
yeah,
Um, See, we've talked.
you want to expound on that? What, because you're
It's
so intrigued by that part.
yes, because
Talk about why. Like, tell them why. What you're talking about.
Zenaida clearly hears from God what it is that she needs to be doing or what she should be doing, what test he's given her, and she listens and obeys, and she sees the results of that. I, on the other hand, don't hear that like the way she does. And so she's trying to convince me that
But
um you build this.
there's a part where you're missing, like you're not adding, like
No,
because
I'm about to get there, I think. She believes that you build your confidence, that you follow your instructions and it becomes more clear. But the fact of the matter is that when she first started hearing her instructions, she was not in a good place. She was actually very anti God and church and everything. So she heard it clear as day, but yet the one that's praying and trying to live a good life and go to church doesn't hear it. So hence my belief that not everyone hears it. So for the majority that are like me.
you know what it is. Hold on, I'm not saying that you're not, but here's what it is. When I got to the place when I was searching for my own authenticity,
Mhm,
that's when I started hearing. I wasn't trying to suppress or give up an image. I already had given up an image. I had
mhm,
given up my reputation. I had if you ask me, I think it all started um when I first my first time I ever lost my shit was April of 2018, and I went on emergency leave, and that's when I was like booked this random Airbnb. 24 hours later, I mean, I booked this like the same day I went on emergency leave. I flew out 48 hours later, and um that's when my Airbnb host so happened to be a mental health therapist. That's when everyone was like, "Wow, that's the universe." I was like, "Fuck off!" And then he told me something that was very valuable to me. He said, "Are you looking forward to going back to Boston?" I said, "No." He says, "You need to find out why," which I already knew why. I just did not want to face the why.
mhm,
And so on the airplane back, I can even remember I was sitting by the window, and I knew this is where I think it started. I knew that I had the opportunity to hide what had happened because I knew my work was not going to say nothing. I knew no one saw it, maybe one person. I knew no one was going to ask me. None of my friends had asked why I went to Costa Rica. Nothing. I knew I was able to escape.
mhm,
However, I also knew if I kept feeding this escape, if I kept feeding the person that I was feeding, I was never going to be free. So the thing I had to do was expose myself. That shit hurt! Ah, man. And I wrote this, I still have it. I
mhm,
have this Facebook post where I threw myself out there. And I believe that is the day I started hearing. After that, I
mhm,
started hearing clear. I started feeling things, hearing things, because the thing that was blocking me from hearing and listening and feeling was this image, this mold that I created, and that person took over this person.
Mhm.
So I could not hear or listen to anything because I had created an image of what I wanted people to see. And so when I gave that person up, I became available.
You gave up the ego. Is that
The
there was
image.
the image? Okay.
Because I still had a lot of pride and ego to get rid of, but I gave up the image of
Okay.
who I wanted people to see me as.
And you knew beforehand that it was going to hurt, and going through it
Oh, I
was
knew that. I
probably
knew
even worse than what you imagined, correct?
I knew I was about to enter hell.
Okay. And was it what you thought or worse than what you thought?
Oh, it was exactly what I thought. And
What'd
I
you do?
would say to anyone that are in relationships that are very toxic
Mhm.
and very manipulative, and you know deep down the
Mhm.
reason why you won't leave that relationship because you know it will be the beginning of hell, the answer is yes, it will be. However, it will not last. I can
So
tell you that.
you would do it again 1,000 times?
Yes, because being in that relationship, being in that situation, being that person, your hell comes in seasons.
Mhm.
Like you'll do anything to get that peace, and then there goes to hell again. Then you'll do everything to get that peace again, and then you go to hell again. And then once you go through the final stages of hell, then you get to have peace for the rest of your life. And so, yeah, you're about to face the hardest thing, but then you don't have to keep reliving seasons of it.
So I think that's a great note to end on, is, how you get to having that almost sounds like eternal peace. Um, but before we end this, is there anything else that you would want anyone listening to know, whether it's based on some of the topics we touched on, or maybe something that we haven't touched on?
I think um I think it's great. I think it's sad that most people don't know this powerful God that really does exist. I
Mhm.
think it's sad because of reputations that God wants us perfect.
Mhm.
And so too many times people know the God that they were introduced to
Mhm.
through traditions or this mandatory need to live by. And I can promise you that God just wants you available. He just wants your attention. And the more you follow your instructions and the more you start realizing, you start following your intuition, it ends up being for you anyways.
Mhm.
Like at first I thought the gym was to help people. And in reality, it ended up helping me. I
Mhm.
thought creating a powerlifting team was going to be too much for me. And in reality, they're the best thing that has happened to me. And it keeps me out of trouble. It keeps me sober. It keeps me the things that I would have never, ever, ever thought in my whole entire life. And so, and the, and then all of a sudden you have this desire to change.
Mhm.
You have this desire to do better, not
Mhm.
because you have to, like, oh, people are watching me. Who gives a shit? Like you just want to now.
Mhm.
You just have this strong desire to become better, to learn more about you. It's like the best trap of your life.
Mhm.
So in my book I wrote something that was very important to me, and I hope you run with this. I don't ask God to show you who he is and not the God that you were introduced to.
Love that. Yes, because I think you grew up the same way. I grew up with that Catholic guilt.
Yeah,
And
I didn't have Catholic guilt.
okay, I had the
It's just
Catholic guilt.
I grew up Catholic, but I didn't have that Catholic
And
guilt.
nothing wrong with the Catholic faith. It's, beautiful faith. I love it. I still will attend mass from time to time. Um, but I feel like, for me, my eyes have been open to greater possibilities, with his unending love and, understanding that there's people out there that hear his voice, that get these instructions. And, that's something that, and I knew about this before you, but it was still newer to me in my life. And so, it's, my eyes have been open. And I know for you, you had an idea of what church was, and didn't,
And I'm not shy about like sharing that.
right.
And I will add this, like, I'm not ashamed of my past, and I'm not ashamed of mistakes that I've made. I'm not ashamed of like, oh, I didn't know. Like, understanding what growth is and what guilt is two different things. Like, if you're still been driven by guilt, you have to ask why.
Mhm.
But if you understand that your mistakes will just make you grow, then
Right.
you're always going to grow. But if
Mhm.
there's some reason there's guilt there, you have to ask why. You're the only one that can answer that question.
Yeah. And I'll admit, I even struggle with that. And I know that, like you said, it, you have to keep, it's like peeling an onion. You have to keep asking, but why, but why, but why, but why? Um, anyone listening, I struggle with that still to this day. And I know that that's what you're supposed to do.
Hmm.
All right.
Anytime you ask for anything for self growth, God will answer within 24 hours.
Okay. So maybe this podcast was for me.
But
All right.
thank you, though.
Of course, anything else you want to add? Any
Oh,
other
there's so
words of
much more,
wisdom?
but we'll
I
make it a
know
part two.
we
We'll
could,
make it a
I
part
would love
two.
to have a part two.
Yes, we'll have a part two. But
Okay.
yes, thank you for asking me those questions. I always welcome them, and I hope everyone out there listening got something out of it. Uh, you're more than welcome to follow my reason why I started Iron Therapy 2.0 at www.irontherapy.me. Make it that's why the reason I picked .me is because it's personal.
Yep.
Oh,
And if
eh,
you haven't picked up her book, I highly recommend it. Where can they find it?
so you can find it on that link. The book it's also on Amazon. Your Yes is Needed. It
Mhm.
tells you the story of my beginning, my middle, and how I got here, and why I got here, and how I went from absolutely no, I'm not doing this, to now doing it
Yes.
with joy.
And also follow her on Instagram. Great stories are shared every day of what the iron therapy and her community and their breakthroughs. Those are always inspiring. So definitely
Thank you.
recommend that as
Yes,
well.
my Instagram is non-profit cartel, and it's not because I'm a nonprofit, or it actually my name is actually because another cousin thought I was a drug dealer. And so I was like, no, I have a job. And so you're like, no, cuz, like, hook me up. What's your, like, and I was like, no, seriously, I have a job. So that's where that name came from, because I was like, he thinks I'm a cartel, but I'm a nonprofit one. So that's how that name's like came into existence.
I always wondered that. Makes sense now. How funny.
So
Yes. So
yes.
nonprofit cartel, follow her, check out her book, and I look forward to a part two.
All right. Thank you guys.
All right. Thanks.